The sun was setting low over the dusty plains, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, when he first set foot on the land that was now his. The ranch stretched wide and empty, its fences worn, barns sagging under the weight of years, and the wind carrying the scent of dry grass and distant mountains. He had inherited it unexpectedly, a twist of fate delivered through a letter sealed in old parchment. Announcing that he was now the owner of the McAllister Ranch, he had never met the man whose name he now carried.
Familiar.
Nor did he know the secrets hidden in the soil beneath his boots. Yet the weight of the legacy pressed on him, heavy as the old iron gate that creaked in the evening breeze. He had been a simple man, used to the small routines of town life, a stranger to the ways of the frontier. Yet the ranch called to him in a language older than words, as if the land itself whispered of bloodlines, debts, and unspoken promises. He felt the pulse of it under his hands when he ran his fingers along the weathered wood of the farmhouse porch. It was lonely, yes, but it was alive. And in that aliveness, he sensed a story waiting to be told. The first night he stayed in the farmhouse, he could hear the wind moan through the cracks in the walls, carrying echoes of footsteps long gone. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like someone pacing in anticipation. The old chandelier swung gently overhead, reflecting the last rays of the sun in fractured patterns across the dusty floor. He lit the oil lamps one by one, their flames casting long shadows that danced like ghosts along the walls. There was a chill in the air, not from the cold, but from the weight of expectation, something he could not yet name, but would soon understand. It was the next morning that things began to take shape. He had barely finished his first cup of bitter coffee when a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. At first, he thought it was some wandering cattle, or perhaps a stagecoach passing in the distance. But as it drew closer, he saw them. 7 women, riding together in a line that suggested purpose. Their eyes fixed on him as though he had been there all along, waiting for this moment. Each woman was draped in the heavy skirts of the old frontier style, hats pulled low, their expressions unreadable yet commanding. As they drew near, he noticed that one carried a bundle, another a small trunk, and the third had a photograph tucked under her arm. All of them bore the same look, a mixture of calculation and curiosity, as if they knew something he did not. They slowed their horses at the edge of the fence, and the tallest among them dismounted first, her boots striking the dirt with authority. She was a woman who carried age and wisdom like armor, her gray-streaked hair hidden under a wide-brimmed hat, eyes sharp and unyielding. "You must be the new owner," she said, her voice steady but laced with a hint of challenge. "We've been expecting you." He blinked. "Expecting me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even despite the tension coiling in his stomach. I just inherited this ranch. That's all." The woman's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Inheriting is one thing," she said, "but some of us have been here a long time, waiting for the man who carries his name. You see, the McAllister Ranch has its ways, its rules, and we have our expectations." He swallowed hard, feeling the blood rush to his head. There was a weight in her words that made the air seem heavier. He glanced at the others, and it became clear that each carried a quiet intensity, a presence that filled the space around them like a living storm. None of them spoke, yet in their silence there was communication, an understanding that transcended words. They were bound by some connection to the ranch, to the man he had never met, and now to him. One of the women stepped forward, holding the photograph. He took it in his hands cautiously, his heart skipping a beat. It was a picture of himself, or rather a younger version of him he barely recognized. There was a clarity to the image, a sharpness that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. How had they come by this, and why? Questions surged like wildfire through his mind, each one hotter than the last. "You see," the first woman said, her gaze unwavering, "the McAllister Ranch does not simply pass from one generation to the next without reason. Every owner leaves a mark, and every mark calls to those who have been left behind. We are those who have been left behind, but we are also those who know the land, who understand it, who have made it our own. And now it calls for you." He felt the weight of the statement, a strange mixture of fear and fascination gripping him. He had never thought about legacy beyond the simple fact of inheritance. Yet here it was, tangible and alive, moving toward him in the form of 7 determined women. There was no malice in them, at least not yet. but there was expectation, and in their eyes he could see the quiet insistence that he would rise to meet a Tor falter. The tallest woman handed him a letter sealed with wax that bore the McAllister family crest. He broke it open with trembling hands. Inside, the inked words seemed to move on the page, describing arrangements, conditions, and promises that tied him to the women who now stood before him. It spoke of care for the land, respect for history, and obligations to those who had long served it in ways he did not yet understand. And at the bottom, in handwriting both elegant and commanding, were the words, "Meet us at the barn at sundown. We will teach you what it means to truly own the McAllister legacy." He looked up from the letter and met the women's gazes. 7 pairs of eyes, each holding a story, a secret, a question. And in that moment, he realized that his life had just shifted on its axis. The ranch was no longer a quiet inheritance. It was alive with intrigue, expectation, and challenge. It was a place where the past lingered like a shadow, where every whisper of wind carried the weight of history, and where the future would demand that he prove himself worthy. He stepped toward the gate, hesitant but determined. The sun dipped lower, streaks of orange and purple folding into the horizon. Horses shifted under their riders, and a tension filled the air that made it hum. And he did not yet know what awaited him at the barn, nor the depths of the connections between these women and the ranch he had just inherited. But one thing was certain: nothing about this inheritance would be simple. As he rode toward the barn, he could feel the eyes of the 7 women upon him, a silent chorus of judgment, curiosity, and perhaps even hope. Each step of his horse stirred the dust. Each moment brought him closer to a reckoning he could not yet name. And as the first stars appeared in the vast expanse of the western sky, he understood that his life on the McAllister ranch had just begun, that every secret, every untold story, and every challenge would converge in the shadows of those barns and fields. He drew a deep breath and pushed open the barn doors. Inside, it was dark, musty, and alive with echoes of the past. 7 figures waited, each one poised, each one confident, and each one ready to shape the destiny of a man who thought he was merely an heir. He had inherited more than land, had inherited a legacy, and with it, a test that would stretch the limits of courage, patience, and understanding. The women stepped forward as one, closing the space between expectation and action. And in that instant, he knew that nothing would ever be the same. The ranch was more than property, it was a story, and he was now its reluctant hero. The night settled in around him, full of possibilities and danger alike, leaving him with a question that would not leave his mind. Who were these women? What had they been waiting for? And how would the McAllister ranch change the man who now called it home? The barn smelled of hay and old wood, but underneath that familiar scent, there was something else. A faint trace of iron, like dried blood, and the musk of long-kept secrets. The man paused at the threshold, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. The women watched him closely, silent and deliberate, their shadows stretching long across the floor as the oil lamps flickered. Each woman had a presence that felt as solid as the beams above him, yet there was a tension that made the space vibrate. The tallest of them spoke again. "I am Eleanor Blackthorne. You may call me Eleanor. These women with me?" She gestured toward the others, who shifted slightly but did not speak. "Have waited for generations in this place. Have lived and worked here, tended the land, and maintained the legacy of the McAllisters long after others would have abandoned it. And now it is your turn." He tried to respond, but his throat felt dry. "I don't understand. Why are you waiting for me, for this ranch?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "The McAllister name carries responsibility. Our families served it. Some paid their debts with blood, some with tears. The land does not forgive ignorance, and it calls to its owner when the time comes. That owner is you." He lowered his gaze to the floor, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He'd grown up in the small town of Cedar Hollow, miles from anything resembling ranch life. His life had been simple. Mornings at the bakery, afternoons delivering letters, evenings spent reading by lantern light. Inheriting a ranch had seemed like a distant fantasy, a story told in old books. Now he realized that fantasy had teeth, and it was biting deep. A younger woman, with dark hair pulled tightly back and eyes like storm clouds, stepped closer. "I am Maris Thornfield," she said, voice quiet but firm. "I have lived on this land since my father's father worked it. I know every ridge, every hollow, every creek that winds through it, and I know the stories that have shaped it. The McAllister Ranch has always been more than soil and timber. It has a life, and that life watches, waits, and chooses. He swallowed hard, trying to absorb the enormity of what she said. Life that chose. The words sounded like a warning and a promise at the same time. How could land itself have consciousness? Yet the tension in the barn told him otherwise. Eleanor stepped closer, and he could see the lines etched in her face, lines carved by decades of work. Worry and determination. "We did not come here to scare you," she said. "But you must understand that there are forces here older than you. It's older than this town, and even older than the stories told in the papers. The women who stand before you." She glanced at the others, are witnesses, guardians, and sometimes enforcers of those forces. "We have kept the balance. We have preserved the McAllister name. We will not allow it to falter." He felt a shiver run down his spine. He wanted to ask who these forces were, what had happened here in the past, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded slowly. I want to understand. I want to learn." Maris tilted her head slightly, studying him. "That is wise. But learning is not simple. You cannot just walk the land and claim it as your own. You must first know its history, its burdens, and its debts. Only then will it accept you." Another woman, shorter, with striking red hair that glimmered even in the dim light, stepped forward. "I am Celine Vale. I have tended the livestock, repaired the fences, and hunted the predators that roam these plains. You may think you inherit wealth and land, but you inherit responsibility. You inherit every mistake made by those who came before, and every hope they failed to fulfill. The ranch is not empty, it is alive with those legacies." The man nodded again, though fear mixed with determination tightened in his chest. Each woman had a story, he could see that. Each story seemed to intertwine with the ranch, binding them in ways he did not yet fully grasp. Eleanor broke the silence. "There are truths here, hidden and dangerous. 7 women stand before you because we have been chosen to protect them, to guide them, and sometimes to demand accountability. The land tests those who claim it, and so do we." He looked at the faces before him, trying to read them. There was no hostility, yet there was an unspoken expectation. They were not strangers. They were not visitors. They were inheritors in their own right, and he, a man who had known only a quiet life in town, was now the center of something that had been building for decades. One of the women, her hair a silver white, stepped forward and placed her hand lightly on a post. "My name is Hester Black. I am the eldest here, though age has not dulled my senses. I remember the days when your grandfather walked these fields. I remember the storms that tore through the valley, the nights we feared for our lives, and the moments that made us swear that this ranch would endure. Now it is your turn to face those storms, whether you understand them or not." His hands clenched the edges of his coat, keen. Inheriting a ranch had never meant inheriting stories that whispered through the dark or histories that demanded courage. He did not yet feel he had. And yet in their eyes, he could see the future pressing against the walls of the barn, waiting for him to step forward. "Why 7? He asked quietly, almost to himself. "Why are there 7 of you?" Eleanor's eyes gleamed in the dim light. 7 is no coincidence. Each woman has a part to play in the legacy. Each represents a different piece of the land, a different duty, a different lesson. We'll need to understand all 7 if you hope to survive what is to come. Maris stepped closer again. "We are not here to frighten you," she said. "But you must know the McAllister Ranch has enemies, both seen and unseen. Those who covet what you now hold, who resent what was earned long ago, may test you. And you will need to be ready. You are no longer merely a man, you are the keeper of this place. And this place has demands." The man felt the barn shift around him as if it breathed in the moment. Dust motes danced in the golden lamplight. Shadows moved along the walls as though alive, and the women's eyes bore into him, steady and unwavering. He realized that he had stepped into a world where nothing was simple, where the past had teeth and the present had claws, and where the future demanded vigilance and courage. Hester's voice broke the tension, soft but commanding. "Come morning, we will teach you the land. We'll show you its rivers, its hollows, its secrets. But tonight is for understanding what it means to inherit not just soil and timber, but history, legacy, and duty. Walk carefully, speak wisely. Listen closely. The land is watching, and so are we. He nodded again, the words sinking into him with weight and resonance. There was no turning back. The ranch had chosen him, the women had chosen him. And somewhere in the darkness, the unseen forces that had shaped the McAllister name were stirring, waiting to see whether he could rise to meet them or falter under the burden of inheritance. The night deepened around the barn. He could hear the faint whistle of wind through the cracks, the soft shuffle of boots on dirt, the quiet murmur of distant animals stirring in the shadows. Outside, the horizon had swallowed the last traces of sunset, and the first stars glittered cold and distant. As he stepped toward the old wooden railing, Eleanor's voice called after him. Remember, every story here is true, every warning is real, and every choice will have consequences. 7 of us have waited for this moment, and now, you must prove that you are worthy of the McAllister Ranch. He exhaled slowly, feeling the enormity of what lay ahead. The barn felt smaller and larger all at once, crowded with presence and history, yet empty enough to allow imagination to wander into danger and discovery alike. His pulse quickened. The women's faces were etched into his mind, each one a mirror of something he could not yet name. Outside, the wind stirred the loose boards of the barn, carrying whispers of secrets untold, debts unpaid, and promises that stretched across decades. The man realized that his journey had only begun, and that the ranch he had inherited was alive with expectations. Mystery and power far beyond what he had imagined. Somewhere in the dark corners of the barn, in the quiet spaces between lamplight and shadow, he knew that the first real test of the McAllister legacy was waiting. The morning came slow over the McAllister Ranch, the sunlight spilling across the fields like molten gold. The man rose before dawn, unable to sleep. His mind was restless, turning over Eleanor's words, Hester's warnings, Maris's stormy gaze, and the unseen weight of the land itself. The ranch was quiet now, but he knew it would not stay that way. Somewhere in the hills, in the hollows of the creeks, and in the shadows of the barns, something waited. Something tested him even before the day had begun. He stepped outside, boots crunching in the frost, and surveyed the land he had inherited. The fence lines were broken in several places, gates sagging and rusted. One of the barns leaned perilously, its boards warped by wind and time. And yet there was beauty in it, untamed, raw, and stubbornly alive. He could feel the pulse of it under his hands, the silent demand of the McAllister legacy pressing against him, reminding him that this was no ordinary inheritance. Eleanor appeared beside him without a sound, her presence as commanding in the daylight as it had been in the shadows. "You are awake early," she observed, eyes scanning the horizon. "Good. The land rewards those who listen before the day begins. You must learn to see what it tells you, even when it does not speak." "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "I've never run a ranch in my life." Eleanor's lips curved faintly. "Then you will learn quickly. The McAllister Ranch does not wait for hesitation. There are debts, old and new, that demand attention. Some will test you physically, some mentally, and some spiritually. You must be ready for all of it." Before he could respond, Maris appeared, her boots kicking up frost as she approached. In her hand was a notebook, worn and frayed. "These are the records," she said. "The land keeps them, past owners, the livestock, the debts owed and collected. The tragedies and the small victories that have shaped this place. If you want to survive, you will need to study them. Every detail matters." He took the notebook with shaking hands. Its pages were filled with meticulous notes, maps of the land, sketches of the barns, lists of animals, and cryptic annotations in the margins. Some entries were straightforward, describing the weather, the crops, or the movement of cattle. Others were more enigmatic, warnings about areas of the land that were cursed or watchful, mentions of events that seemed almost impossible, and references to names he did not recognize. "You'll need help," Maris said, eyes fixed on him. "No one can do this alone. But the wrong kind of help will make the land turn against you. Choose carefully." The man nodded, flipping through the pages, feeling the weight of generations pressing down. Outside the barn, the others moved with quiet efficiency, tending to animals, repairing fences, and performing tasks that seemed simple but required an intimate knowledge of the land. Each woman carried herself with authority, their movements precise, almost ceremonial. He realized that they were not just workers, they were keepers, enforcers, and sometimes, as Eleanor had warned, judges. As the sun rose higher, a new figure appeared on the horizon, a lone rider approaching fast. The man squinted, recognizing a stranger from the nearby town, a man named Corbin Drake, known in the county for his sharp tongue and sharper ambitions. Corbin had long resented the McAllister family, envying their holdings and their influence. The rider slowed as he neared the ranch, eyes narrowing when he saw the 7 women standing near the barn. "You've inherited quite the circus," Corbin called out, dismounting roughly. "I hear the McAllister boy finally came home. Funny, though. Seems the ladies were waiting for you." The man tensed, feeling the sting of insult and the prick of danger. Eleanor stepped forward, her gaze cold and steady. "Hey, this is private property, Corbin," she said. "You are not welcome here without invitation." Corbin smirked, his hand brushing the brim of his hat. "Right. I'm just here to see how the new owner manages. Seems like he's got quite the welcome committee." His eyes flicked over the women, lingering, calculating. "Funny, though. The McAllister ranch isn't supposed to have complications like this." "I wonder what the town will say." Hester stepped beside Eleanor, voice like steel. "Leave, Corbin. You are a nuisance, and the land does not take kindly to troublemakers." Corbin's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a sharp edge. "Nuisance," he said. "The McAllister ranch has always had debts, some paid, some owed. I'm just here to collect what's mine by law." The man felt panic rising but tried to steady himself. He had inherited the ranch, but he had not inherited knowledge of the local politics or the grudges that had been festering for decades. Corbin's presence was a reminder that danger was not only in the land or in the shadows of history, it was alive in the people who surrounded him. "You will find," Eleanor said slowly, "that debts cannot always be collected with threats. Some debts are older than the law itself. Some will demand more than money." Corbin's eyes flickered, and he looked around at the women again, noticing their subtle but commanding postures. "I see," he muttered. "You've all got a history here, too. It's not just him. Interesting." He turned his horse slowly. "We'll see how long this arrangement lasts. Don't take too long to learn the land, boy. Some lessons cost more than you can pay." With that, he rode away, leaving a tension behind that felt heavier than the morning air. The man exhaled shakily, the notebook still clutched in his hands. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You see," she said, "you are not alone, but you are not free from challenge. The land will test you, the women will guide you, and outsiders like Corbin will try to weaken you. You must learn quickly." The day passed in a blur of activity. He walked the fields with Maris, studying the patterns of irrigation and the placement of livestock. He learned to recognize the signs of predators and disease, the subtle changes in weather that could ruin crops or threaten animals. Celine took him hunting, teaching him to track, to read footprints, and to understand the rhythms of the wild. Each lesson was taxing, both physically and mentally, but he felt a growing connection to the land with every step. Yet there was an undercurrent he could not shake. Each woman carried a story that she did not fully share, and he could feel the tension between them, subtle as it was, shaping their interactions. Eleanor commanded with authority, but Maris seemed to have her own quiet influence. Guiding without overt instruction, Hester observed everything, silent but calculating, while Celine moved with a precision that suggested both skill and unspoken past experiences. There was a history here, a web of allegiances and rivalries, and he was in the center of it. By late afternoon, he found himself near the northern edge of the property, where the hills rose sharply and the shadows deepened. He noticed signs of old activity, footprints not his own, strange marks carved into trees, and a faint smell of smoke that did not belong to any fire he knew. His pulse quickened. This land, he realized, had secrets that even the women may not fully understand. And if the land held its own history, so did the people who walked it. Eleanor's voice echoed behind him. "You found one of the old paths," she said. "Few walk it because few understand it. There are places here where the past lingers and where mistakes of long ago can reach into the present. Pay attention. Not everything you see is what it seems." The man turned to face her, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" She shook her head slightly, her eyes scanning the hills. "Some of these hills have seen violence, love, betrayal, and death. Some of the women here have ties to events you will not hear about tonight. Some of the past will return to test you sooner than you think. The shadows lengthened as the day waned. The wind carried whispers he could not fully understand, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. He realized that the McAllister Ranch was not merely a piece of land, nor merely a home to 7 women who had waited for him. It was a living, breathing challenge, one that demanded vigilance, courage, and patience. He looked back toward the farmhouse, toward the barn, toward the women who had become his guides, guardians, and perhaps his judges. Every lesson he had learned so far was only the beginning. Threats from outsiders like Corbin, the hidden histories, and the mysteries embedded in the land itself, all of it was waiting for him. And as night fell over the McAllister Ranch, he understood one immutable truth. The real test had only just begun. The following morning, the ranch was alive with tension. Even the wind seemed sharper, cutting across the plains with an edge that whispered caution. The man rose before dawn, boots stiff from yesterday's exertions, muscles aching from tasks he had barely understood until yesterday. Each day was a test, Eleanor had said, and he was beginning to understand the weight of her words. The McAllister Ranch did not forgive ignorance or hesitation. He stepped outside and found Maris already surveying the northern pastures, notebook in hand, her expression unreadable. "We begin today with the hills," she said, her voice calm but firm. "They are the oldest part of the ranch, where the land shifts and folds. Oh, many dangers hide there, and you must learn to read them before they read you." He swallowed, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. The hills had seemed beautiful yesterday, rolling in green under the sun, but now they loomed as unknown territory, shadows rising between the ridges, secrets buried in their folds. Celine appeared behind him, carrying a rifle and several tools. "We don't just walk the land," she said. "We respect it, defend it, and understand it. And some of what you see will not make sense, and some will test you. Be ready." The man followed the 2 women, each step deliberate, ears alert for sounds beyond the obvious. The hills were deceptive, their slopes gentle from a distance, but sharp and unpredictable as he climbed. Tracks appeared, some fresh, some old, intertwined, like a map of the land's hidden history. He noticed scratch marks on trees, small piles of stones, and patches of earth where animals had clearly burrowed, but some markings did not belong to any creature he knew. Maris stopped suddenly, pointing. "Look there." He followed her finger to a small clearing where the ground was disturbed. In the center lay a worn leather satchel, half buried and covered in dirt. He approached cautiously and opened it. Inside were papers, faded and brittle, listing names, dates, and debts. Among them, he saw references to the McAllister family, some going back decades, some recent, notes about land sales, threats from neighboring ranches, and a few cryptic warnings: "Do not cross the ridge at dusk," one read, "or face what lingers in shadow." His stomach tightened. The land held memory, and these papers were evidence of it, proof that the McAllister Ranch was far more than a collection of barns and pastures. "You are beginning to see," Maris said quietly, "that this inheritance is not simple. Every owner has left marks, and some marks demand payment or acknowledgement. The hills guard their secrets fiercely, and those who ignore them often regret it." The man nodded, pocketing the papers. He had barely processed the weight of that when a distant shout reached him. Eleanor's voice carried over the hills, sharp and commanding. Return to the barn, now." Something in her tone made the blood drain from his face. He raced down the slope, Maris and Celine close behind, the wind cutting past like knives. When they reached the barn, he saw why Eleanor had called. Smoke curled from the far side of the ranch, and in the distance, a group of men approached on horseback, faces obscured by scarves and hats. Corbin Drake was among them, unmistakable, leading the charge. "You weren't kidding about enemies," the man muttered under his breath. Eleanor's voice rang out again, louder now, sharp as a whip. "7 of you guard this place. Defend it. Protect the land. Do not falter." The women moved with precision. Celine took a high ridge and trained her rifle. Maris readied her bows. And Hester and the others organized the livestock and prepared barricades. The man realized that these women were not merely guides, they were warriors, strategists, and protectors. and now he had to prove he could be their partner, their ally, and their strength. The men on horseback closed in, shouting challenges and threats. Corbin's voice cut through the tension. "Hand over the papers. The ranch belongs to those who can claim it. You have no right." The man gritted his teeth, feeling adrenaline surge. He stepped forward. "This ranch is mine, and I will not let you take it." Eleanor's eyes softened just slightly. "Good. Speak with courage, but act with caution. The land watches. Every move counts." The men charged closer, but the women's preparations slowed them, herding them into narrow passes, where rifles and arrows could control the flow. He found himself moving alongside Celine, learning instinctively how to anticipate threats, how to read the terrain, how to act decisively without hesitation. Fear and focus fused together, making him alert to every detail: the shift of the wind, the flash of movement, the glint of sunlight off metal. One of Corbin's men broke through a barricade near the stables. The man found himself in a split-second decision: run or act. He grabbed a lantern and swung it, sending it crashing toward the rider. The man was thrown from his horse, groaning, giving Celine and Maris time to respond. He realized he had begun to feel the rhythm of the land, the rhythm of defense, the rhythm of survival on the McAllister ranch. The standoff stretched, each second thick with tension. Eleanor shouted commands. Hester moved silently to intercept anyone slipping past, and Maris's arrows found their marks with uncanny accuracy. The man, though inexperienced, acted in tandem, learning the silent communication that had passed between the women for years. Then a horn sounded in the distance, a warning he did not recognize. Corbin's men faltered for a moment, and the man realized that more than skill and courage were at play. There was history here, debts and alliances that he was only beginning to understand. The land itself seemed to rise against intruders, guiding the defenders, warning the trespassers. He took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the ranch beneath his boots. Every tree, every hill, every shadow seemed alive, reacting to the conflict. The women's faces flashed in his mind: Eleanor's calm authority, Maris's fierce intensity, Selena's precise focus, Hester's calculating gazand. He understood that the ranch had trained them as much as they had trained him. As the sun dipped low toward the horizon, painting the plains in firelight, the standoff reached its peak. Corbin's men were regrouping, preparing for a final push. The man felt the land hum beneath him, the hills holding secrets that could turn the tide. We could see the determination in the women's eyes. The loyalty and trust that had been built over decades now extended to him. Maris touched his arm briefly. "Remember what you've learned? Trust the land. Trust us. You're ready to face this." He nodded, heart pounding, hand steadying on his rifle. This was the moment that would test everything: the lessons, the bonds, the courage, the understanding of the McAllister legacy. He was no longer the man who had inherited a quiet ranch. He was part of its story now, entwined with the land and the 7 women who had waited for him. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and dust, carrying the weight of generations. The men on horseback surged forward one final time. The tension was unbearable, every muscle coiled, every heartbeat counting. He fired, Celine fired, Maris fired, and Eleanor directed with precision. The hills echoed with the clash, the cries, the commands, and the silent insistence of the land itself. And then, in the gathering shadows of night, a hush fell, sudden and profound. For a brief moment, the world seemed suspended, the dust, the wind, the distant mountains, and the ranch itself holding its breath. The man knew that this was not the end. The conflict had reached its peak, the battle was unresolved, but he also knew something deeper had shifted. He had faced the challenge, felt the pulse of the land, and begun to understand the true weight of the McAllister legacy. He looked around at the 7 women, each face illuminated by the flickering light of lanterns, eyes wide and alive with tension and expectation. The ranch held its secrets still, the enemies lingered beyond the hills, and the trials were far from over. But in that moment, he understood that he was no longer simply an heir. He was a participant, a protector, and perhaps slowly a master of this place that had called to him across generations. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a promise and a warning. He could hear it now, faint but unmistakable. The McAllister ranch had more tests to offer. more mysteries to reveal, and more challenges that would shape him in ways he could not yet imagine. As night fully claimed the sky, the man stood among the 7 women, hearts pounding, breath steadying, eyes alert. Knowing that the true climax of his journey, the reckoning of legacy, courage, and survival, was just over the horizon. The night held a fragile calm over the McAllister ranch. The clash of earlier hours had faded, leaving only the whisper of the wind through the tall grass and the distant calls of animals that had survived the day's turmoil. The man stood on the ridge near the barn, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of the land beneath him as though it had recognized his courage and resilience. The ranch had tested him, the 7 women had guided him, and he had faced the challenge without faltering. For the first time, he truly felt part of the legacy he had inherited. Eleanor stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. There was a softness in her gaze now, the tension of battle replaced by quiet approval. "You have done well," she said. "The McAllister Ranch has judged you, and it has found you capable. That is no small feat." The man turned to her, letting the exhaustion of the day sink in. "I could not have done this alone," he admitted. "I didn't understand the land, the history, or the stakes, not until you and the others guided me." Maris emerged from the barn, brushing dirt from her coat. "We have waited a long time for someone like you," she said. "Someone willing to learn, willing to take responsibility, and willing to honor what has come before. You have shown both." He nodded, glancing at each of the women in turn. Selena's sharp eyes softened as she approached. Hester's calm authority radiated a quiet satisfaction, and the others' faces reflected pride, relief, and hope. He realized that in guiding him, they had also been shaping him, teaching him not only to survive but to belong. The distant hills, now softened by the twilight, seemed to exhale. The land itself had shifted as if acknowledging his presence. The man walked slowly across the field, touching the old fence posts, running his hands along the weathered wood of the barn, and feeling the rhythms of the ranch beneath his feet. Every detail he had learned, every lesson he had absorbed, had coalesced into understanding. He was no longer an outsider. He was McAllister, by name, by duty, and now by heart. Eleanor's voice broke the quiet. "There is one more thing you must know." She led him toward a grove of ancient trees near the center of the ranch. "The McAllister legacy is not only about defending the land, it is about preserving it, nurturing it, and ensuring it thrives long after we are gone. These trees mark the center of the ranch planted by your grandfather.
Oh.
Each tree represents a promise, a commitment, and a bond with the land. When you honor them, you honor the past and secure the future." He ran his fingers along the bark of the oldest tree, feeling its strength, its permanence, and its silent testimony to generations of care and labor. He understood now that the ranch was not simply a place to live or work. It was a living story. One he had been invited into, and one he had earned the right to shape. Celine stepped forward. "Tomorrow, we begin restoring the fences and reinforcing the barns. But tonight is for reflection. You have faced the first true trial. You have learned the land's language and the rhythm of the ranch. That is something few can claim." The man looked at the 7 women who had become his guides, allies, and mentors. Their presence was more than support. It was a testament to endurance, loyalty, and courage. Each of them carried history in their eyes and wisdom in their movements. And he realized that the ranch itself had chosen them to guide him, to shape him into the owner it needed. Hester spoke then, her voice steady and quiet. "You will face more challenges, of course. The land has a way of testing those it calls to, but you have begun well. Yes. You understand the value of patience, the necessity of vigilance, and the importance of respect. These lessons will serve you better than any inherited wealth ever could." The man nodded, feeling the depth of her words resonate. He had entered the McAllister Ranch unprepared, naive to its history and dangers. He had faced threats, navigated mysteries, and learned the intricate dance between land, legacy, and loyalty. And in doing so, he had become more than the man who had simply inherited property. He had become a custodian, a keeper of stories, and a guardian of the land and people who depended on him. The night grew darker, but the stars seemed to shine brighter over the open plains. The air carried the scent of earth and wood smoke, the faint temps of evening flowers, and the lingering warmth of sunlight absorbed by the soil. He breathed it in deeply, feeling the energy of the land course through him. For the first time, the ranch felt like home, Eleanor's gaze softened further. "There is one final test that comes to every owner," she said. "It is not a battle against men, nor even against the elements. It is a test of the heart. Will you care for the land, protect it, and honor its legacy, even when it demands everything?" "You have begun to answer that question already." Maris stepped closer, a gentle smile breaking through her usually intense demeanor. "You have learned quickly, but the land and we are patient. Your mistakes will be met with guidance, your successes with quiet acknowledgement. That is the rhythm of the McAllister Ranch, and you are beginning to move in step with it." The man felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden of uncertainty replaced by clarity. The McAllister Ranch was alive, full of challenges, history, and responsibilities, but it was also full of life, community, and connection. He understood now that he was not inheriting isolation or duty alone. He was inheriting a network of people, a story of generations, and a bond with the land itself. As he turned to look back at the barn, he saw the women moving among the livestock, repairing fences, and tending to the horses with fluid expertise. He realized that their presence had been more than guidance. It had been a test, a demonstration, and ultimately, an offer of trust. He had earned it, and in earning it, he had earned a place in their lives and in the life of the ranch. The man walked slowly toward the farmhouse, the notebook in his hand filled with observations and plans for the days to come. He knew the challenges were far from over, but he also knew that he was not facing them alone. The 7 women who had waited, who had taught, guided, and protected, were his allies, and together they would ensure that the McAllister legacy endured. Night fully settled over the ranch. The stars cast their silver light across the plains, and the hills stood as silent witnesses to the day's events and the promise of the future. The man paused at the porch of the farmhouse, looking out over the land he now called home. He felt the cool night air on his face, heard the quiet rustle of leaves, and sensed the enduring presence of those who had come before him. Eleanor's voice called softly from behind him. "Rest now. Tomorrow, the work continues, and the lessons deepen. But tonight, remember what you have learned: courage, patience, respect, and understanding. These are the true markers of ownership." He nodded, feeling a calm he had never known in his life. For the first time, he understood that ownership was not about control or wealth. It was about connection, responsibility, and care. He had inherited more than land. It inherited history, trust, and the chance to shape the future. Maris approached, placing a hand briefly on his arm. "You are ready," she said simply. Her words were affirmation, reassurance, and acknowledgement all at once. He felt the weight of them, but also the lightness of purpose they carried. Celine, Hester, and the others joined him on the porch, a quiet presence, a united front, and a living testament to the McAllister legacy. Together they watched the night sky deepen, the stars burning brighter as if in approval. The man realized that he was no longer a stranger to the land, the ranch, or the women who had become his guides. He was part of a story that spanned generations, a story he would continue with courage, wisdom, and respect. And in that moment, the McAllister Ranch felt complete, not because the threats had ended, but because the land, the history, and the people had recognized him as worthy. He was no longer just an heir. He was a steward, a protector, and a participant in a living legacy that would endure for years to come. The wind carried the promise of tomorrow, of work, of growth, and of stories yet to be told. The man took a deep breath, feeling the life of the ranch pulse beneath his feet, and he knew that he had finally found his place in the world. For the first time, he smiled, truly and fully, knowing that the McAllister Ranch and the 7 women who had guided him had become home, and that together they would face whatever the future held.